members of the faculty, and my dear friends. Welcome to the final day of Conventus 2020, the annual management conclave of International Management Institute, New Delhi. The COVID-19 pandemic has brought the world to a screeching halt. Institutions, corporations, and governments alike are getting accustomed to this new normal.
Conventus is a legacy that we at IMI New Delhi are determined to continue, come what may. And in that very spirit, we are proud to announce that for the first time, Conventus 20 is being held online. My fellow compere Srijan Jingta and I, Nitya Gupta, shall take you through the Entrepreneurship Summit of Conventus 20. This year, Conventus is structured around the theme Survival and Growth in the VUCA World, Adaptability, Agility, and Sustainability.
The acronym VUCA, which stands for Volatility, Uncertainty, Complexity, and Ambiguity, has gained massive popularity in the business world over the past few decades. The VUCA world demands leaders to come up with realistic and applicable solutions, like tackling volatility with a visionary approach, circumventing uncertainty by bridging the gap between the causes and effects, countering complexity by breaking down the loops of reactions, and countering ambiguity by continuous learning and swift decision-making processes.
For years, we have seen industries change entire business plans overnight to match the current market trends. The 2002 market crash and the 2008 financial crisis had detrimental socio-economic effects on the world. A common factor in both the situations is how unprepared it left everyone. As future leaders, understanding how to tackle these elements will give us the opportunity to stay ahead of the curve. Survival in a VUCA world is the need of the hour, and growth is the true way forward. Before we proceed further into the session, let us have a look at the Conventus video.
Business often takes inspiration from the art of war strategies. Gone are the days when a single textbook solution could work all molds. Challenges have become multifaceted. As experienced by the US Army during the Cold War, VUCA, an acronym describing how less they knew or could think regarding situations. The COVID-19 pandemic has thrown the world into disarray. Everything has become increasingly unstable. The concept of clarity is muddled. Predicting the future is nearly impossible. Interconnectivity is more chaotic than ever. So, how do you plan on coping with the new normal?
To share with us their valuable insights, we are honored to have with us 7 senior corporate executives, Mr. Samar Singla, Mr. Shashank Randev, Mr. Amit Das, Mr. Srinivas Rao, Mr. Chinnappa Naidu Darapaneni, Ms. Shelly Sinha, and Mr. Devesh Chawla. Before we begin with the session, we'd like to give a brief introduction of our speakers and our moderator. It gives me great pleasure to introduce our first panelist, Mr. Samar Singla, who's an esteemed alumnus of IIT Delhi and IIT Bombay. Mr. Singla is the founder and CEO of JungleWorks and Jugnu, and has also founded Click Labs. JungleWorks helps in delivering mobility solutions to entrepreneurs and enterprises looking to provide their customers with an omni-channel experience, while Jugnu is dedicated to revolutionizing the way travel works. Sir, we are honored to have you with us here today.
It gives me great honor to introduce our next panelist, Mr. Shashank Rande. We are proud to have one of our very own alumni for the summit. Mr. Randev is founder VC at 100x Ventures, India's first venture fund to invest in early stage startups using iSafe notes. He is also an angel investor and advisor with a keen interest in B2B emerging technology startups. Previously, he was the founding member and vice president of VCCH, the data platform by VCC Circle. He has also worked with NIIT Limited and Zensar Technologies. Sir, we are delighted to have you here with us today.
It's a privilege to introduce our next panelist, Mr. Amit Das, an esteemed alumnus of IIM Bangalore and the founder and CEO of Think Analytics. Think Analytics aspires to transform the innovation curve for organizations wishing to differentiate at the intersection of businesses, operations, technology, data, and artificial intelligence through its products, accelerators, and advisory services. He has advised Fortune 500 clients and been involved in many industry firsts. India's first alternative credit score, risk-based dynamic pricing, secured lending, checkout technology, and many more. Sir, we are delighted to have you here with us.
Our next panelist for the session is Mr. Srinivas Rao M, an esteemed alumnus of IIM Bangalore. Mr. Rao is a serial entrepreneur and a veteran with over 3 decades of rich experience in information technology industry. In 2008, Mr. Rao co-founded Augis, a global IT risk management company, which was recently acquired by NSEIT. He has also served as a board member and part of the promoter team of Network Solutions NetSol, which is acquired by IBM in 2005. Currently, Mr. Rao is the CEO of Game India and is now working on building a movement to scale mass entrepreneurship. Sir, we are delighted to have you here with us.
We are pleased to introduce you all to our next panelist, Mr. Chinnappa Naidu Darapaneni, co-founder and CEO of Mera Events. Mr. Naidu started his entrepreneurial journey with Versant Technologies, a global software technology company. Post this, Mr. Naidu co-founded Mera Events, which is now one of the largest portals dedicated to online event promotions in India. Mr. Naidu pursued his BTech at JNTU Anantapur. Sir, we are honored to have you here with us today.
It's a privilege to introduce our next panelist, Ms. Shelly Sinha, an esteemed alumna of MICA and IIM Ahmedabad. Ms. Sinha started her career in marketing and has over 17 years of rich experience in the marketing field. She has also so far held positions such as National Head Business Development and Head Corporate Strategy in Parle Agro, DGM Brand Head in India Cellular, and much more. Ms. Sinha is the founder of Blue & Core, an establishment in the lifestyle and apparel domain which strives to deliver products of the finest craftsmanship and designed to elevate the lifestyle of their customers. Ma'am, we feel privileged to have you here with us today.
Our moderator for this summit will be Mr. Devesh Chawla. He is the founder and CEO of Chatur Ideas, a one-stop solution for startups to get funding, mentoring, and a 360-degree execution support. He was felicitated with the titles Entrepreneur of the Year 2018 and CEO of the Year 2019. Mr. Devesh is a mentor and investor himself and has worked with startups like Catapult, Strike, Max Market, Hublio, and many more. Sir, we feel privileged to have you here with us today.
In the light of the main theme of Conventus 2020, the Entrepreneurship Summit will discuss the techniques and startups that can use to sustain themselves in the disruptive and rapidly changing business environment. Now, I request the club theme video to be played, please.
The topic of the discussion for the summit is molding entrepreneurial competencies to navigate through a VUCA world. As it is rightly said by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., the ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in the moments of comfort and convenience, but where he stands at the times of challenge and controversy. No one is going to blame us for being intimidated When big risks come our way, we will need to weigh them appropriately and come up with our assessment about whether they're intelligent gambles. Know that in times of fear and challenge, we often learn and grow the most.
An entrepreneur, by definition, as an individual possessing dynamic traits that distinctively work towards business creation. The resilience exhibited and the competence exhorted by an entrepreneur is the yardstick to reckon the long-term sustenance of his or her venture in an uncertain environment.
Uncertainty has always been a matter of concern for the business world. Events like US-China trade war, the liquidity crunch, the economic slowdown, and several other issues already had the system crumbling down. The advent of the global pandemic aggravated the situation by accelerating the process. In testing times like these, the Darwinian philosophy of adaptation and survival is prescribed as the remedy.
Arguably, the impact of the pandemic could be even worse on startups and small businesses than the established ones. And to survive in this disrupted economy, startups will have to adapt to the new demand environment and pivot the company's business models to make themselves relevant in the new ecosystem. Maybe sometime in the future, history will say that COVID-19 pandemic showed how quickly humanity adapted to the changes.
With this, we would like to invite our esteemed moderator, Mr. Devesh Chawla, to initiate the panel into a discussion of the theme.
Thank you. So good afternoon, everyone. In fact, while I was watching your video that you shared right now, I saw a very important and very interesting point where you see the S&P 500 hitting record highs and the Nasdaq hitting record highs. In fact, the terms volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity talks a lot about how our global stock markets are functioning. So if you actually got to see, the economies are doing bad, but the markets are hitting all-time high. So some people think it's foolishness, some people think it's liquidity. So as long as it's liquidity, you respect that, but you can't rely on that. So that was something that I could just find an analogy or parallel I could draw with the stock markets, hearing the term VUCA. So now taking the panel discussion ahead, my first question is to you, Samar. Samar, you are managing two different companies. Irrespective of a VUCA time or non-VUCA time, it's difficult for people to manage one company, right? And here you're managing two. How do you balance your time and how do you ensure that you give equal justice to both your companies and they keep doing well? Over to you, Samar.
Sure. So I think yeah, it's always VUCA time, to be honest, as an entrepreneur. But to answer your question, I have a very good team that does a lot of work, and we are very experimental and autonomous in our culture. So I think if you want to do multiple things, you really need to build a team that is very autonomous in their thinking. So I think it's not easy because every entrepreneur, including me, it's very difficult for us to give ownership of our babies to people, right? But I think that's what entrepreneurs need to learn and evolve. That if you want to grow, you have to really build a bigger team, trust people and find the right people to take things forward. So I think that's what we do. So
That's
yeah.
interesting. Great. So my next question to you, Shashank, is you have been in this space for a long while. You have been investing into multiple companies. Now I have two questions to you. One is that what kind of investments are you currently looking at, seeing the current COVID situation? And number two is a lot of companies that you have put your money in. I'm sure they must be having tough times because they wouldn't be prepared for this kind of an eventuality. But now these things coming in, how are you helping a company sail through them? So these questions to you, over to you, Shashank.
Thanks, Desh, and good to meet virtually after.
You're breaking, Shashank. Can't hear you very clearly. Shashank? Hello?
I think he left the chat, probably
He must be
rejoining.
reconnecting.
As he was in transit, I guess he would have connectivity issues. So probably we can come to him towards the end.
Surely.
I see. Am I able now?
You're audible.
Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, so to answer your question, it's been over the last few months, Devesh. Just to give you and the audience a quick background. So, 100x is an early stage fund, and we are investing in very early stage companies. And the whole idea is that the failure rate of startups in India is still very, very high, and raising a seed check for these entrepreneurs still a challenge, wherein it can take them anywhere between 3 to 6 months to raise seed capital, which means essentially between 25 lakhs to 1 crore, and essentially the value of the money if it takes them such a long time. So hence our objective was, can we fast track this process of investing and complete the cycle within 20 days. So hence we launched the instrument called iSafe, which is a simple agreement for future equity. And and the objective was to invest in early stage companies within 20 to 25 days upon expression of interest. And with that, we set out in July 2019, and we launched the fund. And since then, we've invested in 29 companies. And the vision for 100x is to create a portfolio size of 400 to 600 odd portfolio companies over the next 4 to 5 years, and essentially become the one discovery platform for growth stage VC funds to come in, since we are the first institution to check into these early stage companies. So the maximum risk
Shashank, are you there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Now I can hear you back. Right. Yes, I can.
Yeah. So essentially making the first institutional check investment into these portfolio companies, wherein we hold no rights, we hold no board seats, as essentially if they're not able to succeed, it's a write-off from us. So our objective is, can we reduce the failure rate of early stage companies by providing them the seed capital? And in that goal and vision, can we build out unicorns and hoping for at least 5 to 10% of our portfolio companies to reach that level. So with that, set out 100x VC. In terms of the challenges which we've seen, so we made 20 investments, and as soon as we did that, the pandemic hit. But fortunately, we worked very closely with all the portfolio companies. They were from all ends of the spectrum. All sectors included healthcare, it included CPG. Included CPG products, SaaS companies, education technology, so on and so forth. And while some of them struggled purely because of the lockdown and they weren't able to move around, for instance, CPG chocolate brand which we invested in, having established the distribution network in few retail chains, weren't able to move further post March. So they kind of suffered. But then some of the other portfolio companies did exceptionally well, as some of the sectors got accelerated during this COVID times. particularly the online collaborative space, education technology. So, so hence we kind of looked at sectors in for our next set of investments in Class 2, which we just announced yesterday, and it was more around which companies or which sectors will be doing well in the coming months or coming years. And with the objective, we went after wellness tech and a couple of others. They're available online right now. But I feel this is a really defining moment for the industry, wherein within this ambiguity, there's a large blue ocean available for entrepreneurs to reinvent the wheel in terms of how large corporations in terms of B2B engagement or customer engagement, B2C, will be completely reinvent. I feel COVID 2020, I think 19 and 2020 is definitely going to break business, but also will give you a clear path for new businesses to grow in new format for the next 10 to 15 years. So those are my initial thoughts, Devesh.
Got it. Thanks, Shashank. I'll come back to you again in a while. So Shelly, my question to you is, so I went through your platform, Blue and Core. It seems to be a very interesting platform. In fact, what I also wanted to understand from you is, don't you feel this is a very competitive field? And how do you manage to, stay afloat in such a competitive environment? That's number one. Number two, how are you making people aware towards this unique and conscious living? So that's a very interesting concept. So if you could just shed some light on that, please.
Yeah. Thank you, Devesh. Am I audible?
Very audible.
Yeah, okay. For the benefit of everyone, let me just allow me a minute to introduce the brand and what it is about before I get to what we are doing and, how we are doing it and how we are managing to stay afloat. So Blue on Core, so if you see, it's actually an e-commerce platform where we have 4 verticals. One vertical is around lifestyle and apparel. The other vertical is around farm to fork. And the third vertical is essentially experiential workshops and experiential tours. So when we started about this, right, I mean, each vertical has a different DNA, but where it all really kinds of comes together is the fact that anything that we do, anything that we curate or we create, that falls under the value system of good and conscious living. So also under the larger umbrella of sustainable living. So for example, yes, like Devesh, you rightly mentioned that this particular space is extremely cluttered. And, given that you are a B2C business, given that you are a marketplace where you cannot compete with the likes of an Amazon or a Myntra or a Flipkart who have, who've really got deep pockets and have also been there for more than a decade now. So having said that, how have we created our differentiation? I think for new age businesses to resonate with consumers, okay, it's very important that you follow it has to be a value driven business. It has to be a purpose driven business. And that's where this good and conscious living or sustainable angle actually comes in. So just to elaborate, what does it really mean in terms of implementation? It basically means that we don't do, no matter how much we are tempted to in the lifestyle and apparel space to, go the power loom way, go synthetic stuff, no, we are actually staying away from that. We are promoting actively a property called sustainable fashion. So where either we are doing products that are only made up of natural fabric, so as eco-friendly as we can get. So look, we don't have a solution, 100% ecosystem that solves for green businesses today. But as close to this as we can get, that's the effort. We're also trying to move towards a zero inventory model. We all know that there is a huge amount of dead inventory that goes into the landfills every single year. So fashion industry, I mean, people are buying, stuff, people are manufacturing stuff which you don't need, and it's all going into trash. So a zero inventory model would typically mean that, look, I will only do make to order, I will do customize, I will do upcycling. So these are a few of the unique features of the lifestyle and apparel property. Within the apparel, beyond sustainable fashion, we are looking at a lot of artisanal stuff. So India traditionally has been an artisanal economy, but where you will see that there are certain examples of artisans, they've been doing those age-old things and they haven't changed. So what does Blue Encore really do? We, with our design intervention, we are trying to contemporize and make it more relevant with the times. That's something that we are actually focusing on. The other things, for example, if you look at the farm to fork property, so farm to fork property is internationally, farm to fork is a big movement. In India, probably what still resonates with people is when you say, organic food kind of stuff, right? So probably people understand naturally grown food, chemical free food, pesticide free food. Farm to fork is a property that talks about, do you know what the journey your food has traveled? And therefore, how good it is for you when it actually reaches to you on the table. So this is about local sourcing, this is about helping farmers, and this is about naturally grown and all of that. What we are also doing is one challenge that is also there for businesses that want to have a story arc of sustainability is the fact that a sustainable ecosystem is at least 5 to 10x more expensive when it comes to procurement. So forget the customer MRP at this point in time. So the question is, if you don't have economies of scale, you are not going to be able to afford that ecosystem. And even if you are able to afford an ecosystem like that, are the customers willing to pay for it? Is there consciousness enough? So I just want to add something here. 2013, there was a Rana Plaza disaster in Bangladesh that, where a lot of garment factory workers, because of the building got collapsed, there were deaths. And since then, internationally, there have been movements which, they talk about who made my clothes and stuff like that, right? So they are talking about fair, ethical, transparent policies, that allow the brands who are actually making a lot of money, but what's the value chain transparency? So we are trying to create that. From a customer point of view, what are we doing? Our experiential workshops and experiential tours is something which is on hold because of COVID. We've not really spent a lot of time on that for obvious reasons, but experiential tours, which we were doing as a physical curated pop-up store pre-COVID, now has moved on to an online vertical. And there we are basically do a lot of experiential workshops, which take you behind the stage as to what goes on into the making. So that's one of the way of promoting and creating. So it is a long journey. And yes, to also say one thing, does the financial equation add up? It's a tough one. So we've decided to take that route. And we're also actively looking at collaborating with, so internationally, again, for example, if you talk about Netherlands, right? There are countries, there are consumers who are extremely ahead of sustainable practices. So there is recycled yarn that is being made. So we are actually looking at collaborating with an ecosystem of manufacturers and bring about products which bring in a design, futuristic design thinking for a better tomorrow. So somewhere we're trying to bridge what you call is the value action gap between the consumers. So the thought is novel, but yes, the profits and the bottom lines are equally important. So coming to the second question that you asked, that how are we scaling and how is COVID really done? So pre-COVID, we were investing. So we had a property called a Bungalow Edit, where we had a lot of homegrown brands, and we would give, really novel experiences under various story arcs in this. Of course, post-COVID, we've pivoted to digital in a very, very sharp way. So the website went live, our digital marketing efforts went live. So, I mean, there is no denial to that. And that, you know, that was the singular way of doing business now. And probably that's the way that's going to, the way we see it in the next 1 year is, so it seems to stay like that. So what have we done to actually really work around the challenges? So one is that I believe a lot of panelists did mention, you know, that whether you are, you know, so I think being an MSME, you naturally have an agility that larger behemoths do not enjoy. So we've been able to reinvent our business model. We've been able to address our supply chain issues. In certain cases, we moved our supply chains closer to the customers. In certain cases, we have diversified our supply chains. In certain cases, we've also eliminated the warehouse chain for trusted partners, because with COVID, the delivery, order fulfillment, all was a challenge. So somewhere I would say that in terms of, we've tried to strike a balance between value competitiveness and customer delivery. And of course, doorstep delivery, we all know today stores are coming to your colonies, your society, your lifestyle is coming in our society doing, you know, because people are not really. So I think those are the levers that we have kind of been able to address at a very fast pace, and that's helped us stay afloat. And yes, I mean, I do believe that these are tough times, but if there is nothing better than a crisis to actually, you know, if your business model is working during the crisis, then it surely will, can be only an upward journey. So I think that's something,
That's great. That's very insightful. Thank you.
Thanks.
So my next question is to you, Srinivas. Hi, Srinivas. You're in a very interesting space of, and you're CEO for Global Alliances for Mass Entrepreneurship. My question to you here is, when we see globally, a lot of economies are providing liquidity so that, you know, the economy comes back on track. We see higher GDP numbers coming in. We see the economy growing up. But despite all of those measures, you only see the equity markets growing up, but the economy is not really growing at the speed at which they're pumping in money. Of course, there's a lot of improvement from March till September in terms of the economy opening up, businesses trying to pick up. But if you see, the demand side is still very, very subdued. Now, in an environment like this, where there is supply side issues are being addressed, but the demand side is not getting addressed, when you create more and more entrepreneurs, do you feel creating entrepreneurs would also get audience for themselves despite having a very subdued demand side? Over to you, Srinivas.
Thanks, Devesh. I think that's a question which will require, you know, I can talk about it for a couple of hours. So, but in the interest of time, I'll try and restrict myself. So, two parts, right? I think one is in terms of the run-up of the, you know, market indices with respect to the real economy. You'll always find that the markets, you know, basically they've already discounted the impact of COVID, and they're looking at, you know, for example, next year, I'm sure most economies. So, for example, we had minus 23% in the last quarter, and we'll probably be minus 10 or thereabouts this quarter. Yeah. And we'll probably never get back to, you know, it will take us a while to get back to, you know, the, let's say, the high single digits, which we had, you know, a few years ago. Having said that, I think in a 2-year window, I think things will start to get back to normal. Right? So the market always looks at future earnings and doesn't really, once they factor in the impact of, depressed earnings in the current period, you know, that's logical. So I wouldn't worry too much about that, right? Fundamentally. Now coming back to, I think fundamentally, right? I think this is a time, and I think I heard a lot of what Shelly said with a lot of interest. And I think this is the time when most businesses, large and small, right? Large businesses suffer from some of the things she spoke about, right? Like, you know, you become flabby, you become, you know, less agile, you become less flexible, etc. And small businesses, of course, suffer from a lack of capacity, financial capital, human capital, and all of those things. But as she said, I think in a crisis lies an opportunity, right? To basically reshape, re-examine the fundamentals of your business, right? And when I say fundamentals, I think one of the things we should always be doing is keep asking ourselves when you are running a business, which is, a simple framework, which some of you would have learned in, I'm sure, for those students in the class here who are still studying, in inventory analysis, we learn something called VED, vital, essential, and desirable, right? So if you apply that same framework to whatever you're doing in business from two standpoints. One is look at it from the activities which you're doing within the company, right? Which of these activities are vital for your survival, vital to sustain yourself, which of these are essential, which of these are desirable. And similarly, from a product market fit, right? If you examine what is it that you're doing which consumers cannot do with, it doesn't matter whether you're a B2B business or a B2C business. If you can start looking at it from that lens and then arrive at a core, and obviously you do a lot of other smaller things like obviously optimize costs, figure out how to rejig your supply chains and all of those things, those are a given. But if you really hunker down and look at what is core to your business. So first of all, do you have a long-term vision for the business, right? Because, and I mean, as someone who's been through several crises, we went through 2001, we went through 2008, and this is the third one. Of course, the scale of this is unprecedented, all of that. Having said that, I think one is have a long-term vision, okay, of what you want to do in your business. Second is be open, okay. Many times one of the challenges most entrepreneurs have is if they think everything they've built is the best thing since sliced bread and are unwilling to, to quote unquote change, pivot, or whatever those nice terms which some of the VCs on this call may really love, right? So I think it's two things. One is about, first of all, right, it is about, as they say, failing to plan is planning to fail.
Absolutely.
Right? So when you think about it, so you will have, even in the best of times, as small businesses will have all kinds of challenges. We'll have talent challenges, we'll have supply chain challenges, we have demand generation challenges, we'll have lack of access to credit. All of these challenges are a given. So there are two elements you have to look at. One is the external environment on which sometimes you don't have much control. I'll call that exogenous. The external environment on which some elements, particularly what you're doing, a lot of what you're building, trying to build or sell, either a good or service, has a discretionary component to it, right? If it's a discretionary component, chances are you'll struggle, right? Even there, you have to figure out what you want to do and cut it down to a point where, as long as you can get into that vital quadrant or vital 1/3, I think you'll do very well. The second element which you underestimate is what I call the endogenous component. The endogenous component is within you, within the enterprise. What is it that you need to do, right? To be able to revision your business, to be able to think about, assume that this is the new normal and figure out what you need to do. And I can give you several examples of companies. For example, I think Shelly talked about this phygital thing, right? Aligning physical and the digital, she talked about a new website. That businesses are, now recognizing that that's the way to go. You can pivot. Faster you can prioritize some of these things, the better the times to come.
Got it. Thanks, Shivnas. Moving to you, Amit. So my question to you is, so you are in a space for which the demand never dies. Is actually what I feel. I'm not sure you know better. It's better to hear from the horse's mouth. But you are in a space where the demand is always there, right? Could you talk about some innovation or some problem that you have solved, which has been like a game changer for the company through your analytics, through your AI platform, and maybe that has survived even this VUCA environment, as we say, and it was definitely doing well when you had proposed them, but it has managed all of these storms, as we say. So over to you, Amit.
That part is the tougher part, but one of the things we often discuss internally is the difference between good times and bad times when you are still trying to be leading the market in a certain direction. Is the nature of innovation moves from the core to the periphery. When you are really faced with extreme distress in the market and maybe your core does not fit anymore, the market does not have demand for whatever you were offering yesterday, and fashionably called pivots, right? So
the innovation moves to the periphery. Something that you were doing in a corner, which was so interesting, or maybe not so interesting because you thought you're doing something else till last week. That peripheral thing becomes the core. An example of that, I think, and that's something that all entrepreneurs should and aspiring entrepreneurs should know that. I think Samar mentioned that it's always VUCA for us in some ways. It's always volatility. It's always a little bit of uncertainty about what your actions may lead to. But almost all amazing stories are also built on our understanding of what that peripheral innovation that was brought to the core was. So to give you an example, 2 years back, if you remember, Supreme Court basically said no Aadhaar for lenders, right? A lot of financial services companies. We used to internally joke a week after that from the notion of digital lending, with one fell swoop, Supreme Court has taken the digital out, because without Aadhaar, there's no digital. And we're like, no, it's only lending, which we're anyways doing for several years. So we spent the next, 3 months, 6 months lobbying with RBI to do a certain set of things in a certain set of ways. It took them about 14 months, I guess. Before January, I think finally they agreed to allow video-based onboarding processes. But the product that we have there, Quick ID, for instance, originated about a year and a half back because 3 kids in the office wanted to do something about no balls in an IPL match. They said, we do so much work in computer vision. We do so much work around video analytics. Can you please give us 3 weeks off so that we can, we want to work on this. It's not going to cost you a lot of money. Why not? Go ahead, do it. So they came up with this notion called third eye, which was that, when the feet lands, you're noticing whether it is ahead of the line, or behind the line or something like that. In some ways, very simple application of computer vision from an implementation side, but very complex from a infrastructure and implementation side. And we were working through that. And we said, why don't you just port this, whatever you have at the back end, to this notion of identity fraud in a video conversation? Because you're still looking at what you believe is a true image, which is the photograph of the person. You're comparing it to a video stream, which is supposed to be a person talking to a computer or a person. And you can kind of superimpose, say it's a real time, the person is alive or not, liveliness. The person is the same person whose photographs I collected somewhere else. And that's how the evolution of Quick ID happened for us. And right now, I believe it's one of those extremely overarching conversations in Indian financial services. Banks took it up, NBFCs took it up. Now insurers, IRDAI approved it as a process. While you're still doing it, now let me talk about a very different pivot to the same idea. We're doing it, and COVID happens. And almost our intuitive body language was, can we use it for video consultation? Because healthcare in a market like US, for instance, is extremely information sensitive because it's patients' healthcare records data. You are suddenly not able to go visit your doctor, but that does not mean that you will share some patient's data with somebody else because you failed to authenticate. It still leverages the same set of technologies, whether it is OCR, whether it is fuzzy matching, whether it is neural nets, whether it is computer vision, same exact tech, just a different application to the problem, which is currently a bigger or a more pressing need for the industry than what we are solving for. So that's what I meant. I mean, our core hasn't changed. Our core was to solve for smarter problems, as we call it. And like you said, we fortunately work in a space where the demand, at least in the near future, does not seem to be going away. It originates from 2 places, because people have a lot of data or people have no data. And in both the spaces, you always have something to do, because it's like mining. Whatever you have, you try to extract the juice out of it. So the demand is not going to go away. You have got to remember what your core is. If your core is to be, and I often joke about it in the office, that if our core were to be another Mu Sigma, then I would have an army of people, and I would skill them, and I would get them ready by industries and make them solve for certain problems. If my goal was to be a Steve Jobs, I would probably be thinking about hardware and implementation and design experiences. My goal is to solve problems using data. That's what our core is. And we have to productize that knowledge every time we do it. So that quest becomes the core, and there's a lot of innovation that happens at the periphery. And somewhere it helps you identify in very quick cycles. And I think as entrepreneurs, I'm not talking about everyone, when you're going from small to big, and everyone has talked about what that agility means to a startup. When you're going from small to big, that agility cannot derail you from your theme. It's not about saying that, if Shelly is working on sustainability, suddenly she'll start, making something so unsustainable just because, the times are bad. That's like going to a very different space. But if she were in a logistics business, she could use the same distribution channel for something else, right? That's a peripheral innovation brought to the core kind of thing. That's kind of how we look at managing it, because everything else has been said. It's a plan. It's not accidents, right? Managing uncertainty or volatility is not about, I'll wake up with a brilliant idea. You have to make it a part of the plan. Analytics has this notion of control charts, right? So you know where you're likely going to be, and there is a lot of ups and downs that you model in. When you model in, as an entrepreneur or a CEO, you basically say, all of it can go wrong. What will I do then? And a boring entrepreneur like me will say, guess what? I'm not a capital raising kind of entrepreneur. How many months of working capital do I have? How do I make it longer? Right? So those become the kind of notions that we kind of keep working with. I hope it addresses the question you asked.
Perfectly answered. Thank you so much, Amit. My next question is to you, Naidu. Naidu, you are in the space of events, right? How is your business model now changing from, I'm sure from day one you were into online, where you to manage everything online, but now with a lot of events just moving online, we hardly are seeing any online events happening from March, and this may continue maybe for a year at the least. So is there a change in the business model from pre-COVID levels, pre-COVID days to now, and will continue for the next few months or maybe years?
So from the business model point of view, there is no change what's happening, because events are happening, and we were being an aggregated technology platform for putting all the events together and helping them to reach out to the larger audience. So from that perspective, the business model or our revenue model did not change anything at all. Okay. But having said that, there is a huge difference, the why events exist itself in the fundamentally, right? Today, whatever is happening, the form of the event and execution is different, which is online right now. That is only 50% of the core event, what pre-COVID, because the primary purpose of an event was, one is knowledge, which is 50%, but the 50% is more of connecting, meeting, networking, right? That was the primary focus, and where people really get the experience of the whole event activity, whether it's meeting with the people, meeting the speakers, or meeting with the sponsors, meeting the potential business owners, that are face-to-face, right? That was the purpose or the primary, the way the events existed. So though the events format changed from a physical event to an online event, which I strongly believe it's only 50% is able to retain it, because the remaining 50% is lost in the online events. Yes, can we do something in the next 1 year? Probably no. The answer is no for the next 1 year. But will it continue forever? Answer is also no, because it has to come back in the form wherever it is possible, because the original purpose of these events will come back into the process. So our model is not changed much, because we are continuing to do the events, but there are some physical part of the events in terms of certain things are not happening it, but that's what is existed. But the number of events, some of the places, even the number of events increased compared to the previous level, because now the opportunity of learning things and then happening of the events is still increased in certain part of it. But the large format events where the real drive revenue generation model is actually reduced. That is where the impact on the business primarily in the process.
Okay, so like you moved from the US to India, right? So do you see India as a lucrative market? Why I'm asking this is because one of the company which is into similar space I've invested into, they are moving to the US and giving an exit to all their investors who have put in money, because they are getting a good round coming in. So wanted to understand, is it the grass looks greener on the other side, or is the grass really greener on the side that one is standing at?
No, because when I moved back to India, the idea was not to start Mira Events. I did not had any idea of that starting a Mira Events. I'm talking about 2008, 9 times, right? There was no even a single technology platform at that moment when I was originally initiating Mira Events, right? But having said that, in the last few years, yes, there are a lot of companies came, but this industry itself is a very crowded market. There are at least 150 different companies all over the world. Until you go and see the real reality in that market, it doesn't really, you don't understand what is the real competition in the process. But for me, like the reason why I came back to India, wanted to do something in India. So I kind of stick to it, even though there was an opportunities for expansion. We said, let's at least win over or conquer your own market. That's one of the reason there are so many like 30, 40 companies came in between after we started in 2010 between now, and none of them are registered in the recent times. But we could able to exist because you're at least focused on one market and trying to capture that market before you go over the other markets. So I strongly believe India has the potential more than any other country. But when you go to the other country, the needs of the funds or the needs of the resources, and some of the core resources has to be there in those countries. Because a lot of times people trying to do within sitting from India, trying to do other countries is not that easier model, because I try to look at that as a product, right? When I was in US, I could able to focus on US market, but in India sitting, I want to focus on India market. At least the core members has to be there as a part of the core, the country where we are focusing. Otherwise, it is still a greener on the other side. Yeah.
Got it. Fine. Well answered. Thanks, Naidu. Samar, coming back to you now. You very well talked about how team plays an important role, and which I completely agree to. It becomes very difficult for an entrepreneur to delegate, because an entrepreneur feels that he can do it in the best manner. But I'm sure the way you have structured your teams at both Jugnu and JungleWorks, I'm assuming that you have given a lot of empowerment to your team members and delegated work to them, and hence you're growing at both the verticals. My question to you, there are two questions to you. One is, you rightly mentioned there's VUCA every time happening, but have things really changed after March for you? A yes or a no? And if yes, how, and how you are combating that? And my second question to you, what's the nirvana moment? Like, where do you want to take your both companies to, where you're going to say, okay, this is what I wanted to achieve and I've achieved and now I'm done? Or is it the cycle is just going to go on and on till you're around?
So yeah, thanks a lot. So let me start by saying that the team building is a continuous process, right? I mean, if you don't feel that you guys are all inadequate for the problem statement, then you are not growing, right? I mean, that's a standard litmus test. Everybody will tell you that, if you're not failing, you are not trying hard enough. So essentially, same kind of theory applies to team also. If you are not feeling overwhelmed, that means your problem is not good enough, right? Or problem statement is not big enough, and growth is not good enough, all those things. So that way, I mean, in fact, last week we had a chief people's officer join our company, and I told him, the first thing I, spoke to him, I told him was that, I mean, I need to learn from you. This is probably like the weakest thing, I'm pretty bad at HR. I mean, it's not my forte, but that's where I really know that, if we have to build a culture, if we have to grow from this point, that's where we need to focus on. So that's like, the constant learning. Everybody needs to keep learning. Everybody needs to keep finding their team members, keep motivating their team members. So it's a constant journey, right? And I think we are far from perfect, far from there. So, but we are trying our best. And the second question, you mentioned, like, actually everything changed. Like, first, so we are a platform company for on-demand startups, right? And mobility, Jugnu focuses on mobility and JungleWorks focuses on delivery. So mobility kind of just went down the ditch, right? I mean, people were supposed to not travel at all, and delivery became hot. So in that sense, one kind of vertical became super hot, one vertical became super cold, and we were able to very quickly, of course, we moved, work from home, which complicated the situation, but we were able to actually transition a lot of our people from the mobility sector to the delivery sector, so that we did not have any pay cuts. We did not have any people being let go and all that kind of stuff, right? So we were a bit lucky in that direction, right? That one of our things did become hot also. On the organization, on the business front, I mean, things just took a very, very bad hit in the short term, because, we were just not prepared for a complete work from home situation, right? But I think, over a month later, things became, I would say, much more organized, because, yes, we have customers which are global. So that way, we are already a little prepared for working remotely, and things kind of worked out. And presently, demand is pretty high. Delivery is where we are struggling. A lot of products are facing so whenever every tech entrepreneur would know that, you feel that you are ready for growth until you get the growth, right? So, and the moment you get the growth, you realize, shit, man, like we are just, we don't have anything, right? I mean, the tech platform is getting slow, customers are complaining, everything is just like going to hell, right? So after the growth happens, or demand comes. So I think we are in that phase, right, where it's very, very struggling. So day before yesterday I wrote, like, these pains are like the pain after a day of heavy exercise. The best way to get rid of it is to exercise some more, right? So I think if we, as a company which has gotten sort of hot, some products have gotten hot because of COVID, and everybody, every smart technology company has figured out like some piece that has gotten hot, some piece that has gotten kind of cold, and kind of pivoted their direction. I mean, I don't think anybody's waiting for the world to go back to the original state and then kind of start all over again. I mean, that's not, I don't think anybody smart would be doing that, right? So what we need to figure out is when things do get back to normal, how does this second, let's say, post-COVID wave look like, right? Do we go back to the original portfolio of products? Do our focus or market scenario change completely? And also, like, how do we go back to offices? Because a lot of people have actually gone back to their hometowns. So today we have people sitting in like over 20 states in India, right? And it's actually pretty powerful also. So I think the answer to these questions, obviously nobody can predict, but I think it's going to be a very, very gray area, right? It will be very stupid if we don't learn anything from this and we just completely go back to the old way of working, right? I mean, remote working has definitely made us much more data aware, much more performance management has become much more KPI driven. So there are positives to it, which we should learn as a company and inculcate in our culture. But it also means that the personal touch, the meet and greet of people cannot be replaced. So this is like a evolving situation, and that's where the feel or the gut feeling of entrepreneurs come in, and everybody has to take their own calls. I don't think there is any formula, and I don't think anybody's theory is going to be better, because if anything, COVID has shown that everybody's theories can be wrong. Sweden was wrong, UK was wrong, then US was wrong. And I think not doing anything was probably the right approach, which is what I guess India did or is doing right now. Like everybody has said, okay, yaar, give up ho gaya, kuch nahi kar sakte, everybody's on their own. So I think, it's a close monitoring approach. But if, let's say, I was to guess, or if I was to venture out a guess, I think portfolio of products will go back to normal, more or less. A lot of the growth that has come, some small part of it will be lost, but not a lot of it, because it's like a catalyst rather than a fundamental change. For example, delivery, I don't think will go back to zero, right? Or grocery deliveries, like expanded quite a bit. It won't go back to zero, in my opinion, or go back to original. I don't think so. And third, on the remote work piece, I think what will happen is companies, including us, will become much more open to remote working. And that will be that one difference. Second will be, we'll have, rather than one big office, we'll probably have 4 or 5 clusters, right? Let's say have a cluster in Bangalore, have a main HQ in Chandigarh, have a small cluster in Bombay, wherever you find talent, really, right? And finally, say people will start to kind of, learn and be a little more KPI driven. I think Indian companies needed to learn this more than American companies, because here talent is cheap to a certain extent, and we always have a tendency to throw people on the problem. So, we have, at least in our company, we were not really very, very cognizant of KPIs and, personal productivity. So we would look at, okay, if, personally we are a bit less productive, also it's fine as a company if we are doing fine. But I think that's kind of now changing because you have to change at scale. So I think these are my thoughts. To be honest, I don't have a very definitive answer, but that's what I would guess.
That's very insightful, Samar, and I think that gives a very, very clear perspective with no definitive answer, but it's a very clear perspective. So thanks for your insights.
Thank you.
Shashank, I'm coming to you again. So Shashank, I know you mentioned that you guys want to invest into 100 companies in a year and continue doing this for the next 4 to 5 years. Now my question here is it spreading yourself too thin because investing into so many companies a right methodology? I'm sure you have thought about it. I think the best answer to this, what I could think about, is you invest in 100, even if 4 to 5 click and they're unicorns, or even one of them is a unicorn, you have made it for the remaining ones. And I think that most of the investors do. But apart from money, what entrepreneurs or startups need is strategic advice as well. What they need is someone to handhold them. So what role is 100x.vc playing in, apart from providing money, also handholding them, and how humanly possible it is to actually handle 100 companies and then that number goes to 500 in the next 5 years? Over to you, Shashank.
Sure. Thanks, Devesh. I hope I'm audible.
Audible.
Great. So to answer your question, Devesh, what 100x is trying to build in India is emulate the US model, which has been working in the US for the last 15 years. It's called Y Combinator. And they've been using safe instrument, and we've realigned that same instrument to an Indian context in terms of and then relaunched it as an iSafe. So literally it's the same model as Y Combinator, where they started with $25,000 check and now have increased it to roughly around 150K, and reduced it down to 1K USD. And that's a model which has worked very successfully for the Silicon Valley and the US, because the startup culture was much more mature over there. And that is the missing piece in India, which has I think needs an answer. And hence we introduced the concept of iSafe, and coming at the bottom of the pyramid. You've been working the ecosystem as well. And as you know, right, there have been 300 incubation centers across India. And there's some fascinating startups in hardware, in software, in social impact, so on and so forth. But the growth stage VC funds, we're typically investing between 5 CR upwards to 50 CR, and not actually going down to the incubation center level and nurturing these. Hence, we saw this opportunity wherein if you are able to do a large investment like a Y Combinator or a Techstar or a 500 startup, which are very similar models globally, that is the need of the hour for India because of the advent of multiple incubation centers. And since growth stage VC funds weren't reaching to these incubation centers or these entrepreneurs who had developed a minimal viable product or a proof of stage, we felt that 100x would be the right answer for that. So that's the problem which you're trying to solve. Question in terms of portfolio management, trust me, we've been on solving that and addressing it every single day is a new learning. Managing portfolio management of 100 companies or even 29 companies right now, which we've done in the last 13 months, is not easy. It is a task. It takes a lot of time, and our team spends a lot of time. As I mentioned earlier, when we invested in 20 companies and we were just about to start looking at the next set of companies in March, COVID hit, and we spent a major chunk of our portion not looking for newer startups but managing the portfolio companies, and hence we were able to raise significant amount. So, for instance, 15 of our portfolio companies between March to May 2020 raised upwards of 4 billion USD. We saw actually participation of Sequoia Capital, Jarate Ventures, and a bunch of HNIs and family offices come in. So portfolio management is very, very important. I think that's where bulk of the energy goes once you've invested. So our journey actually begins wherein we actually deploy the capital first into the company, and that's when we start working. So it's not that we work with the company, we monitor them, and if we like them, then investment doesn't happen like that. We see this tech, we like them in terms of space and the opportunity of the team. We then review it, then investment committee, and if it's a go through, we make the investment within 3 days of doing the. I think I got disconnected. Am I audible now?
You're audible now, yes.
Yeah. So once we made the investment, I think that's where the journey begins, where we work very closely, and we've got so my partners are also very well connected and entrenched into the ecosystem. We've got Sanjay Mehta, who's been a very active angel investor, more than 130 plus investments in his portfolio. He was the first investor in Oyo Rooms. He's had multiple unicorns within his portfolio. We've got Ninad Karpe, who's the other partner, who's the ex-CEO for Aptech and ex-managing director for Computer Associates, and currently resides on multiple boards of listed companies. And we've got Yanesh, who's the CFO of 100x.vc and was previously the operating partner for SMA Venture Partner, which is a very large VC fund, and brings in those best practices. So with a robust team, like my partners and the kind of experience they bring in, we've had certain experience in terms of managing companies. But yes, managing that large set of companies is a task, and believe me, 100x spends a lot of time managing them because our objective is to ensure that they are able to scale, become enough metric-driven portfolio so that a growth stage VC fund is able to come in and take them to the next level. And which I think within a year's time we've been successful in doing that with Sequoia and Charate participating in 2 of our portfolio companies, and having been able to raise upwards of 4 million USD over the last few months for the first set of investments. I think that model is really shaping up. But that's really what we're trying to do, Vish, over here. We're not your typical Accel or a Matrix kind of venture capital, which will do 10 investments a year and large ticket size. No, we are wanting to do a large set of investments. And the core objective is not to only build out unicorns in 2, 3 out of 100, but actually ensure that the failure rate in India for every startup, reduces, much, to possibly a single-digit number. And within our portfolio, we are able to see, at least 80 to 85 companies out of the 100 we do in a year go to the next level in terms of raising, a pre-series A or a Series A. Having a strategic investment through large corporates or even an acqui-hire. And while a lot of people think acqui-hires are not the best offering, well, for some entrepreneurs it might just be. In fact, one of our portfolio companies just got an acqui-hire. We'll be making that announcement. Brilliant model, and it could have only scaled, if this acqui-hire would have come in at the right time. This acqui-hire made it reach to the next level. So there are multiple value stages where a portfolio of 100x will be applicable, and I think that's a larger objective, not for them.
Shashank, are you there?
I think there is some net issues, so we can just move on.
Yeah, I think there's a net issue on his side.
Yes, 10 points. Yes, I think there was a need for a 100x model, and I think we're trying to fill in that gap. And we're very, very optimistic about the kind of companies which will come out of the ecosystem, particularly the incubation centers. So very, very excited, and looking forward to investing in the next set of 60 odd companies over the next few months.
Perfect, beautiful. Thanks, Shashank, for your inputs and for your insights.
Thanks, Dinesh.
So we move to Shelly now. Shelly, you are so as you discussed about your model, and I'm sure a lot of panelists also feel along with me that it's a very interesting space that you're in. But what are you doing to reach out to more and more people? So what's your go-to-market strategy? That's number one. Number two, what's your end goal? Where do you feel you want to take this company to, say, in the next 5 or 7 years? What is that you are actually striving for? So you have these 4 verticals that you talked about. What's the end goal? Where do you want to take this company at the end of 7 years? And currently, what's your go-to-market strategy to reach out to more and more people? Over to you, Shelly.
So, so couple of things, Devesh. One is that, for a small startup, right? I think one important thing as part of the strategy is to actually keep the costs under control. More so during these times when you know that the consumer sentiment is actually down. So one of the things that we've done at our venture is that we've been extremely conscious of what functions we are going to be in-housing, what functions we are going to be outsourcing, what functions are we actually collaborating with. So that technically would have an impact on the business model, on the commercial model, but that also kind of balances the costs and mitigates the risk. So I think that is one thing that we've clearly, looking at. From a go-to-market strategy perspective, I think one clear thing is that because there is a lot amount of clutter, and I think one is to be able to consciously build awareness, consumer awareness. So we are putting in a lot of marketing efforts from our side, largely on digital medium at this point in time, to educate consumers as to why are the products that we are different. So for example, today if you actually there is a festival and all of us are gift some or the other thing, but what if you invest in human stories and not really in mass manufacturing, right? So if you buy something which is artisanal, if you buy something which is handcrafted, that has far more value. So we are doing a lot of value-based education in our marketing efforts, and we are seeing positive response from the consumers on this. So yes, but while I say there is a positive response, I think from what you would expect from a threshold revenue, right? I think there we still have a long way to go. That is one. The other thing, like I also said, is that, so for example, what Srinivas also mentioned, right? What is your core competency and what is it that you are actually going to collaborate for? So today, from a technical point of view, we have clearly said technical is something, technical expertise, the maintenance, upkeep, etc. was all something that we've outsourced. From a design point of view, that is something that we take a lot of pride in. So we are working on creating products that will be very, very different. And like what I say, that can we look at design thinking for a better tomorrow? Now that is something, so we are actually looking at active curation, working together, collaboration with people, with design houses, boutiques, international experts or companies, either to recreate products from recycled stuff or have a different design which is, which kind of fills a sustainable story. So that is something that I feel, we are doing. The other thing from a vision point of view, so at this point in time, to answer that, of course, it's a very early, question, but we're not in the race of being the next unicorn, though I would still like to pitch myself to Shashank perhaps. So, but what I'm trying to say is that, the first step for any startup is viability. So the moment you talk about an e-commerce website, right, there are a lot of advantages, right? You tap into an infinite audience, but there's also an infinite money bleed that you are into. So I think as far as we are concerned at this stage, we have consciously curtailed our ambitions and said, look, we cannot be the Amazon for everyone. So you cannot, compete with the discounts. You can't compete for the money that they have. So we will operate in our own constraints, define certain niches, but stand up for what we believe in and create that niche and own that niche. So I think that is something that we are looking at, and I am optimistic that that's, that we'll be able to create a mark of its own. The other thing, slightly digressing from the question, Devesh, but I do want to add, see, while we all are talking about the hookah world, right? And we are talking about, business scenarios in the wake of COVID, I personally feel that COVID is not a black swan event. And why am I saying that? See, we've had SARS, we've had Ebola, we've had a swine flu, we've had MERS, and all this, right, as late as 2013. So somewhere, I think the failure of the human civilization to take cognizance of something like this has been, we've missed the bus royally. And why am I addressing that? I think if we are today talking to a generation of future leaders, right? I think it is time that we shed out the herd mentality. It is time we shed out our stereotypes and think afresh. So it's not just about business ideas. Can we design a society which has, does a society and a business by design which has resilience towards such things? And that is where I come back that sustainability is an answer to this. Like today, climate change is another problem that we all know about, but how many people are really actively doing things for it? Is it just a checkbox for most corporates like another CSR activity, or is it part of the core on the bottom line? The reason I'm saying that, see, we are all troubleshooting today, right? We are fixing the problem. Okay, COVID is there, now we do this as a vaccine, but why did it come about? And how come we all, were caught unaware of something as large as the magnitude of this? So I think, that for the IMI students, if we really think afresh and see would we like to redesign the society and the business model, that's an overarching, thing. And yes, COVID also has brought in a lot of positives. So if you ask me, pre-COVID, the team would, travel endlessly to the remotest regions of the country to meet artisans, to curate stuff. Trust me, now the entire supply chain is far more flexible. Our efficiency has improved dramatically. So work from home, work from hometown has become even better and even more promising. So I think there is a lot of silver lining, and we've lapped it down. And being an SME, I think we've really taken advantage of that big time. So,
figure out best opportunities in this adversity.
Yeah.
Thanks, Shelly.
Yeah.
My next question to you is to Srinivas is, Srinivas, entrepreneurship is something that can't be forced upon. That is something I feel that can't be even taught by someone. Of course, a map can be made, a guideline can be made, a path can be made. But at the end of the day, entrepreneurship is something that comes from within. And everyone is not built to be an entrepreneur. A lot of people want to be entrepreneurs because it's a fad. People first figure out the solution and then find the problem. Now, in such an environment, you are focused on creating more entrepreneurs, giving them the support system. Everything I understand on the part of giving a support system and making them grow, but how do you ensure that you create that fire within that they need to be entrepreneurs and need to do something on their own? Over to you, Srinivas.
Sir, he's on mute actually.
Unmute.
Sorry. Okay, can you hear me now?
Perfect.
Sure. Okay, so I think part of entrepreneurship is about a sense of agency. It's about having role models and all that, right? So maybe I'll just step back in time, right? So if you think about, I'm going to take you back 40 years. I'm going to take you back to 1981. A bunch of middle-class guys in Bangalore set up a company called Infosys with initial capital of 10,000 rupees. To be able to achieve, it inspired a whole generation of other people to become entrepreneurs. So I think for you to become generally for entrepreneurship to flourish, there are multiple things. So one is obviously you need, we call it seed, soil, and climate. Okay, and I'll just quickly talk about seed. So seed is, you have to have people who think that entrepreneurship is a good choice to make. There is risk involved, but today, as you know, jobs are declining, right? And if you take many sectors across the economy, thanks to things like automation, artificial intelligence, etc., several industries will get disrupted. So think about it. In 10 years' time, the automobile industry will be disrupted like nothing else has been disrupted before, right? So change is, constant. So you need role models. That is what I call seed. Then you need soil, right? And you need climate. So when I say climate, it is about how to make it easier for people to start businesses, etc. But going back to the point you made, Devesh, I think entrepreneurship has to come from within, right? It is intrinsic to the individual. And I think today, I can give you some examples of some of the work we are doing. So for example, so we are working on two segments of entrepreneurs. Okay, so just so you know, it's not just about startups, but it's also about scale-ups. So I talked about in the beginning, I think before you came in, I talked about there are 63 million MSMEs in India, right, generating 30% of our GDP and employing 110 million people, right? And we talk about demographic dividend and all of that. That will disappear if we don't create jobs. And jobs can be only created by entrepreneurs. So essentially, one of the things we are looking at is what can be done to scale those 63 million enterprises. Many of those enterprises actually, honestly, don't deserve to be around. They probably should disappear. But the good ones should be scaled. So what are the things which can be done to help those businesses thrive, grow, and create additional jobs, right? So broadly fixed on, we call it the 3 C's, which is for any business to grow, you need to be able to acquire more customers. You need to build capacity. So when I say capacity, it is about capital, it is about talent and all of that. And the third piece is, of course, cash flow. So most businesses, I'm sure all the entrepreneurs on this call would agree that, cash flow is the single most important element for keeping your business, for first of all sustaining, for keeping your business viable, and then for growing. So that's one piece. The second piece is about how do we help create this thing about, for example, this is a great event because it's about all these young people who are listening to us and hopefully get inspired to go out and, at some point in time in their lives, think about building an enterprise. So it's about creating an entrepreneurial mindset. And when I say entrepreneurial mindset, I'll just spend a minute talking about that. It's about, what are the things which characterize an entrepreneur? An entrepreneur, first is, basically most entrepreneurs want to make a difference. So it's about somebody who wants to say, I went out, I did this, I did something different. I moved away from the herd mentality of going out and seeking a job and trying to do one thing. So that's one, about a need to be different. The second is about the ability to take risks. Third is about the ability to be innovative, right? Fourth is the ability to be able to battle against odds, be persistent, be resilient, and all of that, right? So I think, you have to think about this. It's not about, it's not about switching on, it's not about turning on a switch and everybody becoming an entrepreneur. Because if everybody becomes an entrepreneur, then we'll all be just buying and selling to each other, right? So it's about building some of these things, mindsets about being an entrepreneur. And then, of course, you need an idea. You need a team. I think Samir talked, Singla talked about the importance of building team, being agile, being flexible. And above all, I think entrepreneurship is all about communication. You have a great idea, but if you don't know how to communicate, you're not going to get ahead too far.
Absolutely. Done. Thanks, Srinivas. Amit, my next question to you is, what's the end goal for you here? Is it a valuation or is it creating revenues with profitability? So like, for instance, I have invested in a similar space like yours, and this company got covered by your story yesterday, and they have just raised another $750,000 at a valuation of 10 million. Now the thing is, they are in for the valuation game. Their revenues are pretty low, but they feel building a strong valuation is a way to the exit. I want to understand from your point of view, is that the same thought process you two have, which is building a company which has strong on valuation? Or do you think that the exit for you would be maybe creating strong revenues with profitability and not entering into the valuation game? Over to you, Amit.
That's a question that I get every other week. No, we are not in the valuation game. It's the 7th year of Think Analytics as a company. And I'll quote Nitin of Zerodha to say that we raise capital every year, every day. We raise it from our clients.
Great.
So we've been profitable from day one practically, because I think the only time I remember putting in capital was because there is a government norm which says that you have to have a 1 lakh rupee seed capital to start the company or something like that. The initial capitalization, but we collected our first client check in the 3rd month of our existence, because the banking system is so broken that we had to kind of talk to 3 of them to figure out would any of them open an account for a newly formed company. That's the road we have been on. We have been every year we kind of take a call somewhere around January or February about how's the year looking, and hence work towards our AOP, revise our AOPs for the next couple of years to say what are the next big ideas that we'll invest in. And to that extent, we try things. Some of them will not work out. Some of them will be good successes. And we have many such fun stories. Like Algo 360 probably is the largest alternate credit score in the country. Versus Vito was something that we tried for a year, and we said we learned something about ourselves that, Amit Das and the other 2 founders, you guys are really horrible at building out B2C companies. We shouldn't do B2C. We don't get that space. We are very decent at B2B, but not for B2C. So there's a lot of self-discovery that happens in the journey, but there are some foundational principles that I think are important for entrepreneurs. One is, even if you think valuation is the game, even if you think you're building the company for valuation, are you doing it to get a validation of what you're doing? Or are you doing it because in 2 years' time, you'll be out of the company having pina colada in Bahamas? That I don't think is a realistic dream to have. Valuation, a lot of people, when they see these numbers, they think that this is cash going into the entrepreneur's pocket. No. It's money going into the company. Creating a valuation, yes. But many founders, including, I think, if you get people like the Bansals to talk, you'll realize that their first few years were insanely tough. People don't appreciate when they hear about these $17 billion stories, about how tough the initial few years for an entrepreneur can be, because there's a lot of sacrifice involved. There's a lot of, noise involved, because people out there are raising capital left, right, and center. What am I doing? I mean, I should also be raising capital. Why is that company? 90% of the entrepreneurs that I meet have an opinion about somebody else's venture. That guy should not have got this kind of valuation. I'm doing something, far better. So those that noise is not why you became an entrepreneur. The valuation is not why you should ideally become an. Valuation is an outcome that happens somewhere along the line. Yes. You do a lot of things to drive the valuation. Maybe yes, you do. You start playing a different set of KPIs. Maybe you do. But if your only desire is to be an entrepreneur, to seek valuation within the first year or two, then you're essentially playing the con. Then you should not call yourself a creator or entrepreneur. You should call yourself a con, because you're not in to build something. You're in to make cash and leave. Now, that's not what, in my world, that's not what entrepreneurship is all about. If you do something really well, if you do it sustainably well for a long period of time, and sustainability can come from different sources. It's not like Flipkart in all those years was not sustainable. Every year, they redefined the goals that they were working with, but they were not unsustainable, right? They kept raising the capital that was required to take the company to the next milestone.
True.
And in that process, a lot of people became very wealthy. Not just the 2 or 3 or 5 people who started the show, but a lot of people along the line. And one of the fun stories I remember was about a company called Marketex. Very early, the second acquisition that I remember from the analytics space back in 2006 or 7. Very small acquisition by today's standards. It was a company that sold for something close to $40 million after running an analytics business for 4 or 5 years or something like that. But the founders kind of made sure that the wealth did get distributed across a wide set of people. So when you do the right things for the right reasons, I think sometimes wealth happens as an outcome, but wealth can't be the reason why, con wealth can't be the reason why you got into the game. You get into the game to become a Mahendra Singh Dhoni. You don't think when you're trying to become a Mahendra Singh Dhoni that you will get endorsement worth billions of dollars. That happens along the way. So for us, it's very clear. I mean, the company fundamentally is one of those sustainable, I would not call it juggernaut. It moves at its own, nice ambling pace, growing up at 60, 80, 70, 50, some percentages every year. Because we are a small base. So that level of growth is easy to achieve before someone starts getting weird ideas. But we grow, we reinvest in our people, we reinvest in our ideas. We have a very reasonable internal incubation mindset, letting our own people come up with ideas that can be then taken to the market. We are working towards hiving off some of these ideas into independent, assets or companies, if you will, as a way of kind of creating incentives for the people who work on them as part of the internal organization and stuff like that. So there's a lot of different ways you can play this game. We are probably looking at ceteris paribus. Everything goes well, it's a game of uncertainty. That's why we're having the conversation. Ceteris paribus, I think all good analytics companies probably have a reasonable roadmap to be a small scale IPO in 7 to 10 years. Because the demand, as you rightly pointed out early on, is extremely high. The need for good people, extremely high. The scope to productize your knowledge, extremely high. The scope to build sustainable revenue, very high. It's one of those businesses that does not necessarily swing down with a downturn. You can manage, within the control charts because it never goes away. People always need insights. People always need forecasts. People always need models that help them understand the world around them. So the demand will not go away. So it's a very interesting space that way, at least currently. At the same time, I think the last bit I would leave everyone with, because it's also a student community, is when you think about building great organizations, I think one of the things is that great organizations make the people redundant. So I might have started with a lot of ego about, or whatever, self-worth, about how good I can be as an entrepreneur or how good I am as an analytics professional. But part of the quest to build a great organization is that it makes me redundant, and the juggernaut can keep rolling on. If I fail to do that, if my team fails to be that kind of a team, going back to the team point, then there's something that we have fundamentally, not kept track of in the design of the company about what it needs to be.
Surely.
Even if I go away with the valuation, the company should still continue. It should not die. Right?
Perfect. Great. Thanks, Amit. So my last final question is to Naidu. Dipti tells me we're running out of time and we can't take more questions. So my final question is to you, Naidu. And the question is, what more innovation do you think you can get onto this platform? And is there a social impact that also gets created while you are building this platform and taking this to millions and millions of users and so many events happening in? Over to you, Naidu.
So that's one point I wanted to, thanks for the opportunity for the last to put some words. One point I wanted to bring in this whole process is, in the name of the entrepreneurship, majority of the business are doing now charities. So first of all, we need to go back to the fundamentals of that, the purpose of the why businesses are there and why it is existed. We have to make money. Yes, you earn money in the business and probably use that money for a charity is perfectly fine, But unfortunately, in the name of business, majority of the business are doing charity, which is not definitely good. So what I wanted to tell the community of the students is that, yes, we have to build businesses as directly as the impact of the business. For example, before Mera events, the number of events which were there, which are disparate in multiple platforms, now putting together itself, there is at least 1 million people per annum are benefiting in the process, where their entire time, money is saving, and the process has become so easy. Similarly, there are the 30 to 40,000 customers are benefiting directly because they don't need to spend money on the technology, right? So there is an underlying concept of doing benefit to the society in the process of the business. But I think the fundamental thing is we could still, able to grow to some extent, but not to the extent what is required. So one of the lasting point I wanted to put to the thing is, yes, the passion is more important. Yes, I like somehow the event is so big. But one thing which we failed also is that in quantifying that, what is that big number, right? Events, everybody you ask them, events is a very big industry. But if you try to quantify what is the value which a business can earn from this business, the number sometimes very, very small unless you go deeper into it. So one of the appeal to everybody, whoever is entering into the entrepreneurship, while you're solving a problem, you need to quantify that how much is the addressable or, the target market you're trying to get in. Is that big enough or not? If it is not big enough, then the challenge of running a business will become a charity. So that's very, very important while the next generation entrepreneurs are people, while they're planning to be entrepreneur. Yes, it's a great thing. Solve a great problem. Nice. You're passionate about it. But you also need to quantify what is the business I'm getting into. Is it a good enough business opportunity, market opportunity, the size of the opportunity, and whether eventually it can create a value or a wealth to all the stakeholders in the process or not. So that is briefly in the thing. And the innovations will keep happening. We just need to see, like today, every event is an online event. Innovations keep happening. We just need to adapt what is possible in our process. But the more important is the fundamentals and the basics of the businesses, which is more important, which everybody need to be aware of.
Thank you so much. Thanks for your words. So over to you, Dipti. We may conclude the session now, Dipti. You may want to say a few words before you want to conclude this one. Before that, I would like to thank all the panelists. You all were very insightful, and I'm sure we all learned a lot from you guys. So thank you so much, everyone. Over to you, Dipti.
With this, we'll quickly move into the Q&A section. I request Shivam to please take over.
Ritik, please go ahead and ask your question. Also address the speaker that you are asking the question to.
Question is to Mr. Srinivas, sir. So, sir, considering the time when the startups or MSC are looking to survive and not to expand, so where the opportunities for you as a venture capitalist lies, and how are you planning to capitalize it?
Okay, so first of all, I'm not a VC. Okay, I think Shashank is a VC, so you should direct this question to Shashank. And I don't know. I'm assuming some of the other entrepreneurs on the call may also be investing in their personal capacities. So I think they'll probably be better qualified to answer this question.
Mr. Shashank, if you'd like to answer the question.
Could you repeat the question again?
Ritik, please go ahead.
Yes, so my question is, considering the time when the startups or MSMEs are looking to survive and not to expand, so where the opportunities for you as a venture capitalist lies? So as the risk has increased exponentially. So, and how are you planning to capitalize it?
This is a fully loaded question. It's a broad question. Let me just attempt to take it down. So this is Ritik, right?
Yes, sir.
So, yeah. So Ritik, the thing is that the reason why 100x or other investors are becoming active in startup investments in 2020 is because it has reached a point, over the last 15 years where the industries are being transformed. So for instance, let's talk about MSMEs, SMEs, startups in manufacturing. Now, manufacturing sector is going through a massive drive of, automation, which is being enabled by IoT sensors, and a lot of innovative startups are coming around in that space. Now, irrespective of COVID or not, we still need to manufacture. The cars, automobile sector are still delivering vehicles. There are a bunch of new models which are being launched right now over the next 6 months. And the process of consumption is not going to stop. The process of having humans in those manufacturing plants, to what extent, and the process of machinery doing a large chunk of work would be interchanged, and percentage would be entwined. So hence, it is, as I mentioned earlier, this is a very interesting time because it's an inflection point. The risk is always high for all investors, and for the longest time, investors had been investing in stocks. For the longest time, investors had been investing in real estate. And startup over the last few years is now becoming an investment asset class, just at par at compared to other asset classes. That being said, the venture capital business is of risk, right? So there are risks. There is high risk and there are high returns. But that is just one side of the story. The reason why venture capitalists are becoming more active now is because this is not about just funding so many startups and because founders are rahe hain, wo startups bana rahe hain. No, I think India has reached a point for the first time, and I was doing my engineering to the point when I was doing my MBA in IMI. We used to have, data plans were very different. When I was doing my engineering, the data plans was outgoing was 5 rupees, incoming was 2.5 rupees. SMS ka 1 rupee 50 paise lagta tha. Today, you guys are in a generation where tier 2, tier 3 cities, you guys have like unlimited Airtel, Jio data plans, right? And hence, platform like TikTok scaled to such heights where tier 2, tier 3 individuals were given access or the opportunity to showcase their talent or whatever. I'm not a huge fan of TikTok, but I'm just giving that as an example, right? So for the first time, Indian generation, your generation or the millennial generation has witnessed technology which your previous 3 generation over the last 60 years have not. So within that, this disruption is being brought about with founders and entrepreneurs who are millennials. They're coming into this space, they're building out new solutions. For instance, in COVID, a lot of companies have built out newer collaborative platforms for B2B companies. A lot of companies, we've invested in 9 companies right now. Some of them are fresh out of colleges, entrepreneurs who are building out relevant solutions. So the point is that today, despite COVID, startups, MSMEs or SMEs, and particularly MSMEs and SMEs are, have been forced and cajoled to automate and reinvent the wheel during COVID. Hence, there is a need for newer solutions, and some of these startups are building these solutions. Hence, it is, so to speak, quote unquote, our duty as venture capital to find them, identify them, and invest in them so that they can grow and scale. And while the asset class will continue to remain risky, but we are witnessing a time in 2020 in India, which I personally believe was a time which Silicon Valley went through in the late 50s and 1960s. If they had not invested or backed or done the things they did in 1960s in US, they would have not reached what they are, the stage they are at. And I personally am a firm believer India is at that stage, plus or minus COVID. COVID aa gaya, wo alag baat hogi, but I feel that is the stage we are in. So I hope I've attempted to answer your question. It was a very rounded question, but this is my attempt to, kind of give you some sense of my perspective on that.
Oh, okay. So
it is always an enriching experience when industry veterans who have already proved their mettle come together to elaborate the potentials of a seemingly difficult scenario like COVID-19. As per Mr. Singla, the industry is always VUCA, and the key is to invest in an efficient and dedicated team. I'm sure Ms. Shelly Sinha's idea of making good and conscious living the differentiating factor in a cluttered space will give a different angle to our fellow students. Shashank sir walked us through the importance of reinventing ourselves if we truly wish to plow ahead and what the scale may be the type of situation. Mr. Amit Das gave us a valuable point of view that all amazing stories are built upon the periphery of VUCA and innovation will be the way forward. The thoughts presented by Mr. Srinivas Rao were very much in line with the famous saying that within crisis lies the seed of opportunity. It is in times like these that we can find our true potential, and hence we should keep asking more questions to ourselves while preserving our long-term vision. For Mr. Naidu, the black swan from Wuhan gave an opportunity to reinvigorate the inner student within himself and learn and explore about the newer possibilities. Mr. Devesh really helped collaborating the similar approach, contrasting perspectives our panelists presented and gave a coherent understanding of the topic. On behalf of everyone virtually present here, I express my sincere gratitude to the guest speakers, Mr. Samar Singla, Mr. Shashank Randev, Mr. Amit Das, Mr. Srinivas Rao, Mr. Chinnappa Naidu Darapaneni, and Ms. Shelly Sinha for taking out time from their busy schedules and sharing their thought-provoking insights with all of us. Post this session, we feel relatively more aware and equipped to understand and subsequently bring about innovative practices in today's business environment as leaders of tomorrow. I would like to take this opportunity to thank Mr. Devesh Chawla once again for consenting to be the moderator for the session and conducting the session in a highly coordinated manner.
Ladies and gentlemen, with this we conclude the Entrepreneurship Summit. We are certain that the session has been very enlightening for each one of us present here. I would like to take this opportunity to commend all the guests, participants, speakers, professors, alumni, sponsors, students, and staff of IMI for making this session an unparalleled success. We would like to express our sincere gratitude to Professor Nalin Jain, our mentor, for guiding us every step of the way. We also thank the media persons for the online coverage of the event. Our sponsors for the event: RPSG as Associate Partner, MBA Trek as Career and Skill Development Partner, IOCL as Co-Sponsor, DUBeat as Digital Media Partner, Health and Happiness Private Limited as E-Commerce Partner, Cengage as Education Partner, Divanka as Fashion Partner, Brewhouse as ICT Partner, Multimind Creations as Innovation Partner, Punjab National Bank as Loan Partner, DU Express and Human Capital as Media Partner, Mint as News Subscription Partner, Radio City as Radio Partner, College Dunia as Social Media Partner, Unity as Student Community Partner, Innovators Bay Technologies as Technologies Partner, Campus Time Pune as Youth Partner, FinLadder, Tribe Concept, Umbrella Genix, Dr. Vedya's, Cambia Sports Fair, Superior Wire Company, Unschool, Edupeer, Yourspace SG, and Sage Publishing. Thank you all.
Thank you.
We request the panelists to kindly stay back and join our breakout rooms for short session with our media team. It'll be just 2 minutes. Thank you so much.